The Soviet Union wasn't anything like what Western movies show. You know, those Cold War thrillers where every Russian lives in a grey concrete nightmare with KGB agents lurking behind every corner? The reality was way more bizarre, and in some ways, way worse. Imagine waking up in a place where your personal bathroom wasn't personal at all, where the toilet and shower were shared with 7 other families, where every single morning meant strategic planning just to brush your teeth without someone pounding on the door. That was daily life for millions of Soviet citizens. And while you lie there in your soft bed with your private bathroom just steps away, let me paint you a picture of what it meant to wake up on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, let's head back to the Soviet Union of the 1950s. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. So congratulations, you just woke up in a Soviet communalka in Leningrad, 1953. Stalin has just died, but his legacy is everywhere around you. The air in your room is chilly, central heating exists, but it's inconsistent. Your breath makes little clouds in the morning air. The thin blanket you've piled with coats for extra warmth has left you with a slight backache. Not like your comfy bed right now with its memory foam and perfectly regulated temperature. Your ears pick up the sounds before your eyes fully open, the clatter of pots in the shared kitchen, someone's argument about who used the last of the sugar, a toilet flushing through ancient pipes that groan like they're being tortured, a baby crying in the room next door. The walls in these old pre-revolutionary apartments are thick, but the doors are thin and sound travels in strange ways. You're one of the lucky ones. Your family has a room to itself, a single room, mind you, not an apartment, that measures about 150 square feet. This room is your entire living space. It's where you sleep, eat when you're not using the communal kitchen, entertain guests, and store everything you own. Privacy is a luxury that simply doesn't exist here. The concept would seem almost bourgeois. You swing your legs over the side of the narrow bed that doubles as a couch during the day. Your parents sleep on the fold-out bed on the opposite wall. The small table between will later be cleared for meals. Your clothing hangs on hooks along the wall. No closet, no dresser. Space is too precious to waste on such luxuries. Time to face the morning challenge, the bathroom. In a communalka with 8 families, timing is everything. Too early and you'll be shivering in the cold. Too late and you'll be standing in line, possibly making yourself late for work or school. The unwritten schedule that everyone grudgingly follows gives each family about 15 minutes. Some mornings, that's barely enough time to use the toilet, splash water on your face, and brush your teeth. You grab your toiletry kit, everyone keeps their personal items separate, and your towel, opening your door carefully to avoid the squeak that might wake the neighbour's baby. An angry neighbour is the last thing you need this early. You step into the long corridor that connects all the rooms. This hallway is dim, lit by a single yellow bulb. The parquet flooring, once elegant in pre-revolutionary times when this was a single apartment for a wealthy family, is now worn down by decades of foot traffic. The wallpaper is peeling in places, revealing layers beneath like geological strata, each representing a different era of Soviet history. The bathroom door is closed. Bad sign. You stand in line behind Dmitry Petrovich, the factory foreman who lives in the room near the entrance. He nods at you, his face still puffy with sleep, his grey stubble catching the weak light. Nikolaeva is in there, he mutters, referring to the elderly widow who seems to take the longest despite having the least hair to wash. Been 10 minutes already. You sigh and lean against the wall. This is normal. This is life. the daily negotiation of shared space that every Soviet citizen learns from childhood. While you wait, you might as well check the day's schedule posted near the kitchen entrance, an informal system to manage kitchen time slots, especially for dinner when everyone is trying to cook at once. The kitchen itself is a strange mix of private and public. Each family has their own designated shelf in the single refrigerator, their own cabinet for dry goods, and often their own cooking burner. The single gas stove has been modified over the years to accommodate multiple pots simultaneously with 4 or 5 burners of varying reliability. Some families have even installed their own separate burners to avoid the inevitable conflict over cooking times. Finally, the bathroom door opens. Steam billows out as Nikolaeva emerges, her thin hair wrapped in a towel. She gives you a curt nod as she passes. Dmitry Petrovich gestures for you to go ahead. His need is less urgent than yours, a small kindness in a system where small kindnesses matter enormously. The bathroom is basic, a stained tub with a shower attachment, a toilet with a chain pull, a cracked sink. The hot water is actually hot this morning, a good omen for the day ahead. You rush through your routine, keeping one eye on your watch. 7 minutes, 8. You need to leave enough time for others. Back in your family's room, your mother is already up, heating water on the small electric burner that's technically not allowed, but that everyone has anyway. It's for tea, the lifeblood of any Russian morning. The samovar, a family heirloom that somehow survived the revolution, the civil war, the purges, and the Great Patriotic War, what Russians call World War II, sits ready to serve. Hurry, she says, not unkindly. Your father has already gone to the bread line. This is part of the daily choreography as well. Your father rises before dawn 3 times a week to stand in line at the bakery. Fresh bread is one of the reliable pleasures of Soviet life, and the state keeps it affordable, but you have to be willing to wait for it. On his assigned days, your father brings back enough for your family and for the Kuznetsovs down the hall, and on alternate days, Mr. Kuznetsov does the same. These unofficial arrangements, these systems of mutual aid, are how people survive. Your mother hands you a cup of strong black tea and a bowl of kasha, buckwheat porridge, sweetened with a precious spoonful of sugar. You eat quickly, standing up to save time, the routine so ingrained you barely notice it anymore. They're saying there might be oranges at the gastronome today, your mother says, referring to the state food shop 3 blocks away. I'll try to go during my lunch break. Oranges. The word itself feels exotic, a burst of colour in the monochrome winter. They appear rarely, these southern fruits, making their way to Leningrad from Soviet Georgia, or sometimes even from abroad. Their scarcity makes them special. If your mother is lucky enough to get some, one will be saved for a special occasion. Maybe even New Year's, still months away. You finish your tea, grab your coat from its hook, heavy wool, practical rather than fashionable, and prepare to face the day. Before leaving, you check yourself in the small mirror near the door. Your clothes are clean and presentable, if not exactly stylish. Style isn't a priority in the Soviet 1950s, especially not for ordinary workers. Functionality matters more than fashion. Outside the apartment, the stairwell is dark and smells faintly of cabbage and tobacco. The elevator, installed sometime in the 1930s, has been broken for as long as anyone can remember. You walk down 5 flights, your footsteps echoing in the stairwell. The street greets you with a blast of cold air. October in Leningrad means the beginning of the long descent into winter. The sky is the colour of wet cement, and a light drizzle falls, not quite rain, but enough to dampen your spirits along with your coat. People hurry along the sidewalks, collars turned up, heads down against the weather. The tram stop is crowded with workers heading to the morning shift. You join the huddle, stamping your feet against the cold. When the tram finally arrives, it's already full, but somehow everyone manages to squeeze aboard, bodies pressed together in a strange intimacy that nobody acknowledges. The tram rattles through the streets of Leningrad past the grand buildings of the imperial era, now divided into communalkas like yours, past newer apartment blocks built hastily after the war to address the desperate housing shortage. The city is a layer cake of history. Baroque palaces alongside constructivist workers' clubs, alongside classical Stalinist architecture. Through the fogged windows, you catch glimpses of the city waking up, lines already forming outside shops, women with string bags hoping for a delivery of something worth buying, street sweepers in orange vests clearing the previous day's debris, posters on walls proclaiming the success of the latest 5-year plan, showing happy workers exceeding their quotas, their faces alight with socialist fervour. The reality inside the tram is less enthusiastic. Faces are tired, resigned to another day of work in factories or offices where initiative is rarely rewarded, and meeting the plan is what matters, not actual productivity or innovation. Yet there's a certain security too. Everyone has a job, everyone has a place, however humble. At your stop, you squeeze your way to the exit, mumbling, "Excuse me" and "Pardon" as you step on toes and brush against damp coats. Outside again, you join the stream of workers heading toward the factory gates. The Kirov Works spreads out before you, a sprawling complex of buildings where thousands of workers produce machinery for the Soviet state. Smokestacks release plumes into the grey sky, and the sound of metal on metal creates a constant industrial backdrop. The factory is a city unto itself, with its own rhythms and hierarchies. At the gate, you show your papers to the guard, who barely glances at them. He sees you every day, after all. Inside, you head to your section, nodding to colleagues along the way. The changing room is humid, with the body heat of workers removing street clothes and donning work attire. Conversation is muted, practical. Who has heard about a shipment of winter boots coming to the department store? Whose child is sick? Which section of the factory might exceed its quota this month, earning everyone a bonus? Your locker contains your work clothes, sturdy pants, a thick shirt, protective gear for your specific job. You change quickly, the workday waits for no one, and tardiness can mean trouble with the shift supervisor, or worse, attention from the party representative who keeps an eye on worker discipline. The factory floor is already humming with activity when you arrive at your station. The noise is immediate and enveloping. Machines pounding, metal screeching against metal, the shouts of foremen making themselves heard above the din. The air is thick with the smell of oil and hot metal and the sweat of hundreds of workers. Your job is precise and repetitive, operating a lathe that shapes metal components for tractors. These tractors will go to collective farms across the Soviet Union, part of the endless drive to mechanize agriculture and increase production. You take pride in your work, despite the monotony. There's something satisfying about seeing the raw metal transformed into a useful part, about knowing your hands have created something that will help feed the country. The morning passes in the familiar rhythm of work. Your hands move almost without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over. Your mind wanders as it often does to dreams and plans, maybe saving enough for a radio, maybe one day getting your own apartment through the factory housing list. Though the wait is years long. Maybe seeing your name on the board of top workers, earning a little extra money and respect. Around you, the great machine of Soviet industry grinds on, workers at their stations, each a cog in the vast apparatus of the state economy, quotas to meet, plans to fulfill, the new Soviet man and woman building socialism through labour. But the reality is more complex than the propaganda posters suggest. You see how corners are cut when materials run short, how quality is sacrificed for quantity when the end of the month approaches and quotas loom, how the official numbers reported upward bear little resemblance to what's actually produced. You see too the small resistances, workers slowing down when supervisors aren't watching, saving their energy, the jokes whispered during breaks, subtle mockeries of the system everyone depends on but few fully believe in anymore, the informal networks that ensure you can get the parts you need when official channels fail. This is the double reality of Soviet life in the 1950s, the official story of socialist progress marching ever forward and the lived experience of ordinary people navigating shortages, bureaucracy, and the thousand small frustrations of daily existence. Mid-morning, the factory horn sounds for the first break, 10 minutes to stretch, to grab a quick smoke for those who do, to exchange a few words with colleagues. The factory cafeteria is open, serving weak tea and basic snacks. Some workers bring their own food from home. A sandwich, perhaps, or leftover kasha from breakfast. You step outside for a moment, grateful for the fresh air despite the drizzle. The factory yard is grey concrete, but beyond the walls you can see the city, and beyond that, glimpses of the Baltic Sea. Even through the industrial haze, there's a certain beauty to Leningrad. The city, built by Peter the Great as Russia's window to the west, the city that survived 900 days of Nazi siege during the war. The horn sounds again. Break over. Back to the machines, back to the quotas, back to building the socialist future one tractor part at a time. The day stretches ahead, predictable in its demands yet full of the small human dramas that unfold in any workplace. And as you return to your station, adjusting your protective goggles and checking your tools, you're part of something larger than yourself, a vast experiment in creating a different kind of society, for better or worse. The Soviet system has its deep flaws, its repressions and shortages, its contradictions between ideology and reality, but it also provides a basic security, a sense of belonging that many find comforting in an uncertain world. The lathe spins up again, metal shavings curling away from the blade. Another component takes shape under your practiced hands. Another small piece of the Soviet economy slides into place. The morning shift continues, each hour marked by the factory clock that everyone watches with the same intensity. Time moves differently here, stretching out during the long hours of work, then suddenly accelerating as the end of the shift approaches. There's a rhythm to factory life, as predictable as the seasons yet never quite the same from day to day. You work steadily, your mind half on the task and half elsewhere, on the evening ahead, on the letter you received yesterday from a cousin in Moscow, on the rumour that the factory might exceed its monthly quota, meaning bonus pay for everyone, small hopes and concerns, the texture of ordinary life. Around you, the great industrial symphony plays on, the sounds of machinery, of human voices calling instructions or warnings, of metal and wood and the basic materials of production. This is the sound of socialism being built, or so the slogans say. The reality, as always, is more complicated, but for now, the work continues, carrying you through the morning toward whatever the rest of the day might bring. The factory horn blares, signalling the change of shift. It's now 1962, and the Soviet Union has evolved since Stalin's death. Khrushchev's thaw has brought subtle changes to everyday life. The fear that once permeated everything has lessened, though it hasn't disappeared entirely. People speak a little more freely, though they still watch what they say and where they say it. You've moved up in the world. After years of faithful service at the Kirov Works, you've been promoted to section supervisor at a newer factory in Moscow. The capital city pulses with energy that Leningrad, for all its beauty, couldn't match. Moscow is the heart of Soviet power, where decisions that affect millions are made behind the Kremlin walls. More importantly, you now have your own apartment. Not a room in a communalka, but an actual one-bedroom apartment in one of the new Khrushchevka buildings sprouting across Moscow. These 5-story apartment blocks are basic, cheaply constructed with thin walls and tiny kitchens. But they offer something precious: privacy. Your own entrance, your own bathroom, your own kitchen. After years of communal living, this feels like unimaginable luxury. The buildings themselves are identical, row after row of rectangular blocks arranged in micro-districts. From the outside, they look like giant filing cabinets for humans. But inside each apartment, people create homes, applying their own touches to the standardized spaces. Your apartment has a small balcony where you've placed a few plants that struggle against Moscow's pollution. The furniture is standard Soviet issue, functional rather than beautiful, but it's yours. The morning routine is different now. You wake to an alarm clock instead of the sounds of neighbours. The bathroom is free whenever you need it. Breakfast is still tea and perhaps bread with butter, but you prepare it in your own kitchen at your own pace. Small freedoms, but they matter. Your commute has changed too. The Moscow metro is a marvel of Soviet engineering and architecture. Unlike the utilitarian subway systems of many Western cities, Moscow's stations are underground palaces decorated with mosaics, sculptures, and chandeliers. Propaganda? Yes, but beautiful propaganda, designed to elevate the daily experience of the ordinary worker, to suggest that the Soviet system values them enough to make even transit beautiful. You stand on the crowded platform surrounded by workers heading to factories, offices and construction sites across the capital. The train arrives precisely on schedule. The Moscow metro is famously reliable, and you squeeze aboard with dozens of others. Despite the crowd, there's a peculiar silence. Few people chat during the Moscow commute. Some read newspapers or books, but most just stare ahead, lost in thought, saving energy for the workday ahead. Your stop is in an industrial district on Moscow's outskirts. The factory itself is newer than the Kirov Works, built during the post-war industrial expansion. It produces components for Soviet televisions, still a luxury item for many families, but increasingly common as the Soviet standard of living slowly rises. As section supervisor, you have responsibilities beyond your own productivity. You oversee 20 workers, making sure they meet their quotas, maintaining discipline, and dealing with the inevitable problems that arise when materials run short or machinery breaks down. It's a delicate position, caught between the demands of upper management and the realities faced by workers on the floor. You arrive early, as always. Good supervisors set an example. Your office is little more than a glass-walled cubicle at the edge of the factory floor, but it represents your rise within the system. On the desk sits a photo of your family, a telephone that connects to other departments, and stacks of paperwork, the endless documentation that oils the gears of the Soviet bureaucracy. The morning meeting with other supervisors is the first order of business. The factory director, Comrade Volkov, presides. He's a party man, competent enough, but owing his position more to political reliability than technical expertise. His deputy, the chief engineer Sokolov, is the one who really understands how things work. This division between political authority and practical knowledge is typical throughout the Soviet system. Comrades, Volkov begins. I've just come from the ministry meeting. The planned targets for the third quarter have been increased. We're expected to raise production by 12%. A murmur runs through the room. 12% is substantial, especially mid-year when resources have already been allocated based on the original plan. "Where are we supposed to get the additional materials?" asks Antonina Sergeyevna, supervisor of the assembly section. She's been at the factory since it opened and isn't afraid to ask difficult questions. Volkov shrugs slightly. "The ministry assures us the supply increases will follow. In the meantime, we must find reserves within our current allocations." Everyone knows what this means. Reserves is code for cutting corners, for making do, for the 1,000 improvisations that keep Soviet factories running despite the rigid planning system. It's understood but never officially acknowledged that meeting targets often requires creative solutions that might not strictly follow regulations. The meeting continues with updates on various issues: a delayed shipment of components from Sverdlovsk, a visit from party officials next week, the upcoming factory sports competition. Throughout, there's the subtext that everyone understands: the official goals and the practical realities rarely align perfectly, and the gap must be navigated carefully. After the meeting, you head to your section to greet the workers as they arrive. You know each of them, their strengths and weaknesses, their family situations, their ambitions or lack thereof. There's Mikhail, a talented technician who drinks too much. Galina, a young woman recently graduated from technical school. Old Fyodor, who remembers the war and works with meticulous care but at his own pace. "Good morning, comrades," you say as they gather. "We have new targets from above, 12% increase." The responses are predictable: groans, eye-rolling, a few muttered comments, but there's no real resistance. Everyone knows how the system works. Targets increase, workers adapt. Life goes on. "We'll start by checking our inventory," you continue. Galina, Nikolai, go through the storage room, count everything, including the unofficial reserves. Everyone understands. The unofficial reserves are components and materials hidden away for emergencies, a common practice in Soviet factories where official supply channels often fail to deliver on time. It's technically against regulations, but without such measures, production would frequently grind to a halt. As the workers disperse to their stations, you feel the familiar tension of your position. You're responsible for meeting the planned targets, which means pushing your workers to produce more, faster, but you also know their capabilities and limitations. Push too hard, and quality suffers or machinery breaks down. Not hard enough, and you miss the targets with consequences for everyone's bonuses and possibly your position. The factory day falls into its rhythm. Machines hum, components move along the production line, workers perform their specialized tasks with varying degrees of enthusiasm and precision. Your job is to keep it all flowing, to solve problems before they become crises, to maintain the delicate balance between quantity and quality that the plan demands. Mid-morning, the first crisis hits. A machine on the assembly line stops working. The operator, Ivan, looks up with frustration. "Same problem as last month. The motor's overheating." You examine the machine. It should have been replaced years ago, but the new equipment promised by the ministry never arrived. "Get Petrov from maintenance," you tell a nearby worker. Then, to Ivan, "Can you work on the backup unit meanwhile?" The backup unit is older and slower, but it functions. This is another unofficial adaptation, keeping old equipment running past its scheduled replacement, finding workarounds for chronic shortages. Soviet factories excel at improvisation, at making do with what's available rather than what's needed. Petrov arrives, toolbox in hand. He's nearing retirement age, with decades of experience fixing machinery that official protocols would have scrapped long ago. Again, he sighs, seeing the problem. "I'll see what I can do, but we need the new part from Kharkov." "Is there anything in the workshop we could use?" you ask, meaning, can you fabricate something that will work well enough? Petrov considers. "Maybe. Let me check what Sergey's been hoarding." he heads off toward the maintenance workshop, where Sergei, the head of maintenance, keeps his own unofficial inventory of parts salvaged from other machines or fabricated in-house. This is how things actually get done, through personal connections, unofficial channels, and creative interpretations of the rules. The formal system, with its rigid plans and centralized allocation of resources, is too slow and unresponsive to meet the daily challenges of production. So a parallel system has evolved, one that everyone participates in but nobody officially acknowledges. By noon, Petrov has the machine running again, though he warns it won't last long without the proper replacement part. You make a note to call your counterpart at the Kharkov factory. You once helped them out with some capacitors during a shortage, and perhaps they'll return the favour. The lunch break offers a brief respite. The factory cafeteria serves basic but filling food at heavily subsidized prices: cabbage soup, kotlety, meat patties with mashed potatoes, compote to drink. Food is fuel here, not an experience to be savoured. Workers eat quickly, some reading the factory newspaper, others discussing last night's hockey match or sharing family news. You sit with the other supervisors, the conversation a mix of shop talk and careful gossip. Who's being considered for promotion to the central office? Is it true that the electronics factory across town received a shipment of Japanese components? Will the summer vacation schedules be approved soon? Information is a valuable currency in the Soviet system, and these informal exchanges are how much of it circulates. Official channels provide only selective facts, so people rely on personal networks to fill in the gaps. The result is a society where rumours flourish alongside official pronouncements, where truth is often somewhere in the middle, and where everyone becomes skilled at reading between the lines. After lunch, you check on the afternoon's production. The numbers look good so far, not enough to meet the increased target, but better than you'd feared. You'll need to find efficiencies somewhere though. Perhaps the evening shift can take on additional work if you arrange for extra payment through the bonus system. The bonus system is another key element of Soviet industrial life. Basic wages are relatively low and standardized, but bonuses for exceeding quotas can significantly increase a worker's pay. It's the state's way of providing incentives within a system that officially rejects capitalist competition. In practice, it creates its own distortions, encouraging quantity over quality, leading to end-of-month production surges and sometimes outright falsification of numbers. Your afternoon is consumed with the paperwork that documents everything the section produces. The Soviet economy runs on documentation, forms filed in triplicate, reports for various departments, statistics that travel up the hierarchy to become part of the vast data collection that supposedly guides central planning. How much of this information actually influences decisions at the top is unclear, but the paperwork must be completed nonetheless. At your desk, you fill out production reports while keeping one eye on the factory floor through the glass partition. You've become adept at this division of attention, satisfying the bureaucracy while still managing actual production. It's a skill every successful Soviet manager develops. A knock at your door interrupts the paperwork. It's Dmitri from the personnel department, a young man with ambitions beyond his current position. His visits usually mean either a problem or an opportunity, sometimes both. Comrade supervisor, he says with a formality that suggests official business. The party committee is reviewing candidates for the advanced training program in Moscow. Your name has been mentioned. This is significant news. The advanced training program could lead to a position at the ministry level, a considerable step up in both responsibility and privileges, but such opportunities in the Soviet system always come with political dimensions. I'm honoured, you reply carefully. Who has recommended me? The question is important. Sponsorship matters in the Soviet hierarchy, and knowing who supports you helps navigate the invisible currents of power. Dmitri smiles slightly. Comrade Sokolov spoke highly of your technical abilities, and of course your participation in last year's voluntary weekend work project was noted favourably. The translation is clear. The chief engineer values your competence, and your visible enthusiasm for officially promoted activities has been recognised. This is how advancement works, a combination of genuine ability and demonstrated political reliability. Not party membership necessarily, many managers aren't party members, but at least a willingness to participate in the rituals that affirm loyalty to the system. The committee would like to see more involvement in the factory's political education sessions, Dmitri adds. Perhaps you could lead one next month? The topic is technical innovation in service to socialist construction, and there's the implicit bargain. Show more political engagement and the path to advancement opens wider. It's not crude coercion you could decline without immediate consequences, but the incentives are clear. I'd be happy to prepare something, you say, knowing that an evening or two of research and writing is a small price for potential career advancement. After Dmitri leaves, you return to the production floor for the final hours of the shift. The afternoon energy is different, a combination of fatigue and the push to complete the day's quotas. Workers move with practiced efficiency, their bodies knowing the routines even as their minds might wander to evening plans or personal concerns. You make your rounds, checking quality, offering encouragement or correction as needed, maintaining the human connections that keep things running smoothly. A word of praise here, a suggestion there, a quiet warning to a worker whose attention is slipping. These micro-interactions are as important as the formal procedures in maintaining productivity. As the end of the shift approaches, there's the usual acceleration of activity. Nobody wants to leave tasks unfinished for the evening shift, partly from professional pride and partly because incomplete work reflects badly on the section's performance metrics. The last hour sees a flurry of completions, quality checks and handovers. Finally, the horn sounds, signalling the end of the day shift. Workers quickly clean their stations, a point of Soviet industrial discipline, before heading to the changing rooms. The evening shift workers are already arriving, creating a brief overlap where information is exchanged, issues highlighted, continuity maintained. Your day isn't quite over. There's a final meeting with the other supervisors to review the day's production and address any issues before tomorrow. But as you walk toward the administration building, you feel the subtle shift from work self to private self beginning. Soon you'll leave the factory gates, and despite the system's attempts to blur the boundaries between work and personal life, you'll step into a different role as neighbour, family member, friend, individual. This separation isn't complete in Soviet society, where one's work identity carries significant weight in all aspects of life, but there is still a distinction, a space where private thoughts and relationships exist apart from official roles. It's in this space, apartments, kitchens, circles of trusted friends, that much of what makes life meaningful takes place, regardless of the system's attempts to collectivize all experience. The evening stretches ahead with its own possibilities and constraints. Perhaps a stop at a shop if a rumour of available goods proves true, an hour in line if necessary, maybe a visit to a friend's apartment for tea and conversation, or a quiet evening at home with a book or the radio. Small pleasures within the framework of a system that promises collective achievement but delivers mostly collective limitations. As you enter the meeting room, you carry this awareness with you of the gap between official narratives and lived experience, between socialist promises and daily compromises, between the ideal Soviet citizen portrayed in posters and the real people navigating a complex system with a mixture of conformity, resistance, and simple perseverance. It's within this gap that the true story of Soviet life unfolds, day after ordinary day. The morning sun filters through white curtains in a Moscow apartment. It's 1968 now, and the world is changing. In Paris, students are rioting. In America, protests against the Vietnam War are growing. And here in the Soviet Union, a new generation is coming of age. One that has no personal memory of Stalin's terror or the hardships of World War II. The alarm clock rings and 13-year-old Natasha reaches out to silence it. Unlike her parents' generation, Natasha has never known communal living. She's grown up in this small but private apartment with her own tiny bedroom that doubles as a study. The room contains a narrow bed, a desk, and bookshelves filled with carefully selected volumes, from approved Soviet children's stories to translations of Jules Verne and Jack London that introduce young Soviet citizens to foreign worlds in politically acceptable packages. On her desk sits a nearly completed homework assignment on Russian grammar. Education is serious business in the Soviet Union, and children learn this early. The state invests heavily in education, with a rigorous curriculum focused on mathematics, sciences, and Russian language. Foreign languages are taught too, often German or English, though the emphasis is on reading technical literature rather than conversation. Natasha's school uniform hangs ready on the back of her door, a brown dress with a black apron for regular days, white apron for special occasions. Around her neck she'll wear the red scarf that marks her as a pioneer. Almost all Soviet children between the ages of 9 and 14 are pioneers, members of the Vladimir Lenin All-Union Pioneer Organization. It's not technically mandatory, but non-participation would raise questions about a family's ideological commitment and potentially limit a child's future opportunities. The pioneer scarf is more than a piece of clothing. It's a symbol of belonging to the collective, of participation in the official youth culture that the Soviet state has carefully constructed. Natasha ties it with practiced ease, the routine as familiar as brushing her teeth or braiding her hair. In the kitchen, her mother is already preparing breakfast. Kasha again, the ubiquitous porridge that forms the foundation of many Soviet meals, accompanied by black bread and tea. Her father sits at the table reading Pravda, the official party newspaper. The radio plays softly in the background, broadcasting the morning exercise program, followed by news emphasizing industrial achievements and friendship between socialist countries. "Hurry, Natasha," her mother says. "You have pioneer meeting before classes today." Pioneer meetings are a regular part of school life, sessions where children participate in organized activities designed to instill Soviet values. They sing patriotic songs, discuss the achievements of Lenin and the party, plan community service projects, and prepare for various competitions between pioneer troops. These activities aren't viewed as indoctrination, but as proper civic education, teaching children their role in the collective and their responsibility to contribute to society. Natasha eats quickly, gathers her school materials, and heads out. The school is within walking distance, one of the advantages of Soviet urban planning, where micro-districts are designed with schools, shops, and other services clustered near residential buildings. The morning is crisp, autumn painting the trees in Moscow's parks with hints of gold and red. Other children in identical uniforms converge on the school from surrounding apartment blocks, creating streams of brown and white flowing toward the imposing building with its statue of Lenin by the entrance. Inside, Natasha joins her pioneer troop in the assembly hall. 30 children stand in formation, scarves bright against their uniforms. At the front, the pioneer leader, a young woman studying education at the university, calls them to attention. The ceremony begins with the raising of the Soviet flag and the recitation of the pioneer oath. I, a young pioneer of the Soviet Union, in the presence of my comrades, solemnly promise to passionately love my Soviet motherland, to live, study, and struggle as the great Lenin bequeathed according to the laws of the pioneers of the Soviet Union. The words are familiar, repeated so often they've become almost automatic, yet there's still something stirring about 30 young voices speaking in unison, affirming their place in the great Soviet experiment. The collective experience is powerful, creating bonds between children who will grow up together, study together, and eventually work together in various branches of the Soviet economy. After the ceremony, regular classes begin. The Soviet school day is structured and intensive, typically beginning at 8:30 and continuing until mid-afternoon, 6 days a week. Subjects are taught in 45-minute periods with short breaks between them. The curriculum is standardized across the country. A child in Moscow learns exactly the same material as a child in Vladivostok or Tashkent, following identical textbooks and lesson plans. Natasha's first class is mathematics, taught by a stern woman whose dedication to her subject is matched only by her intolerance for carelessness. Soviet education emphasizes mathematics and sciences, areas where the country competes internationally and which form the foundation for engineering and technical careers that the planned economy requires. The teaching style is traditional. The teacher explains concepts at the blackboard, students take notes, complete exercises, and are called to the front to demonstrate their understanding. Rote learning and memorization play significant roles, especially in subjects like history, where the official interpretation of events must be absorbed precisely. But there's also genuine intellectual rigour, particularly in mathematics and sciences. By the time they finish secondary school, Soviet students have typically completed coursework in algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, physics, chemistry, and biology at levels that often exceed Western requirements for college admission. After mathematics comes Russian literature, another cornerstone of Soviet education. Students study the classics of Russian literature extensively, though the interpretations are filtered through the lens of Soviet ideology. Pushkin, Tolstoy, and Chekhov are presented not just as great writers, but as critics of the pre-revolutionary order and forerunners of Soviet consciousness. For lunch, students eat in the school cafeteria, a simple meal of soup, kotlety, meat patties, and compote, fruit drink, subsidized by the state to ensure all children receive proper nutrition regardless of family circumstances. The equality of the cafeteria, like the uniformity of dress, reinforces the collective nature of Soviet education. Afternoon classes include history, taught strictly according to Marxist-Leninist principles, with emphasis on class struggle and the inevitable progress towards socialism, and physical education, where basic fitness is supplemented with pre-military training, especially for boys. The Soviet system views physical development as inseparable from intellectual growth, preparing children to be both productive workers and defenders of the socialist homeland if necessary. After school, Natasha doesn't immediately return home. Like many Soviet children, her day includes extracurricular activities organized through the school or the pioneers. Today, it's choir practice, preparing patriotic songs for the upcoming celebration of the October Revolution. Other days might involve sports, chess club, technical circles where children learn basic engineering skills or various forms of community service. These activities serve multiple purposes. They provide safe, supervised environments for children of working parents. They develop talents that might serve the state, and they further socialize children into Soviet values and collective behavior. They're also genuinely enjoyable for many children, offering opportunities to develop friendships and interests beyond the academic curriculum. Evening falls early in Moscow autumn. By the time Natasha returns home, streetlights are already glowing in the gathering dusk. Her parents won't be home for another hour. Both work full-time, like almost all Soviet adults. The apartment is empty, but Natasha has her key on a string around her neck, another marker of Soviet childhood where independent responsibility comes early. She makes herself a simple snack and settles at her desk to complete homework. The amount is substantial. Soviet education demands significant study outside classroom hours. Tonight's assignments include mathematics problems, memorization of a Pushkin poem, and preparation for an upcoming geography test on the industrial resources of the Soviet republics. Around 7, her parents return from work, tired but carrying a small treasure, oranges, a rare treat secured through her father's workplace distribution. Such parallel systems of allocation, where goods are distributed through workplaces rather than shops, help compensate for the chronic shortages in regular retail. Dinner is simple but filling. Cabbage soup, buckwheat with a small portion of meat, black bread and tea. The family eats together, discussing their days. Natasha's father asks about school. Her mother reminds her about the winter clothes that need mending. The radio plays softly in the background, now broadcasting classical music rather than news. After dinner comes the family's television time. The television set in the corner of the living room is relatively new, a source of pride and the center of evening entertainment. Programming is limited to a few state-controlled channels, broadcasting a mixture of news, educational programs, classical music performances, approved films, and occasional light entertainment. Tonight features a documentary about Soviet achievements in space, the cosmonaut program being one of the genuine sources of national pride that crosses ideological lines. The images of Yuri Gagarin and other space heroes promote the narrative of Soviet scientific prowess and the superiority of the socialist system in developing human potential. As bedtime approaches, Natasha prepares for the next day, laying out her uniform, checking her schedule, organizing her school materials. The routine is comforting in its predictability, a structure imposed partly by the state but internalized as the natural rhythm of life. Before sleep, she reads for a while, a collection of approved stories about pioneer heroes, young people whose courage and dedication to socialist principles offer models for emulation. The narratives are simplistic by adult standards, but absorbing for a child, still constructing her understanding of the world and her place in it. 5 years pass. Natasha is now 18, in her final year of secondary school, and the decisions that will shape her adult life are approaching. The Soviet education system has tracked students throughout their school years, identifying aptitudes and directing them toward appropriate futures. Natasha's strong performance in mathematics and sciences has marked her as a candidate for higher education, perhaps in engineering or medicine. University admission is competitive but based primarily on academic performance rather than financial resources. Education at all levels is free, with stipends provided for university students. However, the number of places in each field is carefully planned according to the state's projected needs for various specialists. Personal preference is considered but subordinate to economic requirements. The Komsomol, the Communist Union of Youth, which most Soviet young people join at 14 when they graduate from the pioneers, plays a significant role in this transition period. Membership is even more important than pioneer participation, as it becomes part of an individual's permanent record and can significantly affect future opportunities. Komsomol recommendations influence university admissions and job placements, creating strong incentives for active participation and demonstrated ideological commitment. Natasha attends a Komsomol meeting at school where university options are being discussed. The room is more subdued than pioneer gatherings. These are young adults now, more aware of the system's constraints even as they participate in its rituals. The Komsomol leader, a university student fulfilling his own obligation for social activism, presents information about various institutions and the application process. Engineering is particularly needed in the current 5-year plan, he explains, especially in the fields of electronics and automation. The Moscow Engineering Physics Institute is seeking qualified applicants, and Komsomol members with strong academic records will receive priority consideration. The message is clear. Individual talents should be aligned with state priorities, yet there's also genuine opportunity here. A working-class girl like Natasha can aspire to become an engineer or doctor or scientist, pathways that might be financially impossible in many Western countries. The system has limitations and demands conformity, but it also offers certain forms of mobility and security. After the meeting, Natasha walks home with her friend Olga. Their conversation reveals the complex reality of Soviet youth in the early 1970s, a mixture of official participation and private skepticism. "Are you really going to apply for engineering?" Olga asks. "I thought you wanted to study languages." Natasha shrugs. "Engineering graduates get better housing assignments, and my father says there will be more opportunities for advancement. My cousin Sergei knows someone who has Beatles records." Olga changes the subject, lowering her voice slightly. "Real ones, not copies. He invited us to listen on Saturday." This is the dual consciousness that many Soviet young people develop: outward conformity to official expectations alongside private explorations of alternatives, particularly Western cultural influences that find their way through the Iron Curtain despite official restrictions. The Beatles, blue jeans, American films shown at private gatherings, these become symbols of a different kind of life, glimpsed imperfectly through the filters of Soviet isolation. The next day at school, the class attends a special lecture on Soviet science and world progress. The speaker, a local party official, emphasizes how the socialist system creates better conditions for scientific development than capitalism, where research is supposedly driven by profit rather than human needs. The students listen with expressions of appropriate interest, taking notes that might be checked for ideological correctness. Afterward, in the corridor, brief comments are exchanged. "My uncle works at the Research Institute," one boy whispers. "He says they're 5 years behind the Americans in computer technology." Such private assessments, shared only with trusted friends, create an alternative information ecosystem running parallel to official pronouncements. Most young people become adept at navigating between these worlds, knowing when to demonstrate enthusiasm for Soviet achievements and when it's safe to acknowledge their limitations. For most, this isn't experienced as painful hypocrisy, but as a practical adaptation to reality. They genuinely value certain aspects of Soviet life: the security, the community, the ideals of equality and collective welfare, while recognizing the system's failures to fully deliver on its promises. Few envision overthrowing the system. They simply create spaces within it where private truths can exist alongside public performances. In the school library, Natasha researches university options. The books are well worn but comprehensive, covering various institutions and fields of study. The librarian, an older woman who has worked at the school for decades, offers guidance based on her knowledge of generations of students who have passed through. The Polytechnic has an excellent program in electrical engineering, she suggests. Several of our graduates have done well there, and the dormitories are newer than at some other institutions. Such practical considerations, the quality of housing, the reputation of professors, the availability of stipends, shape educational choices as much as academic interests. The Soviet system promises education based on merit, but navigating its realities requires knowledge of its unofficial hierarchies and networks. As the school year progresses, Natasha and her classmates prepare for final examinations and the transition to adult life. For some, this will mean university studies. For others, technical schools that provide more specialized training. For still others, immediate entry into the workforce. All know that their performances now will significantly influence their future paths within the system. The future stretches before them, predictable in its broad outlines but with variations possible within its structures. They will become engineers, doctors, teachers, factory workers, office employees, contributing to the socialist economy in assigned roles. They will receive apartments eventually, though often after years on waiting lists. They will marry, have children, vacation at state-run resorts on the Black Sea if they're fortunate. Few imagine the system itself might not endure. The Soviet Union in the early 1970s appears stable despite its inefficiencies and constraints. The experiences that have shaped these young people, the pioneer ceremonies, the Komsomol meetings, the standardized education with its emphasis on collective achievement, have prepared them for integration into the existing order, not for its transformation. Yet change is already working beneath the surface. The generation coming of age has subtly different expectations than their parents, shaped by relative material security rather than revolutionary fervour or wartime sacrifice. They take certain benefits for granted while being more aware of the system's limitations, especially in comparison to glimpsed Western alternatives. They don't yet know it, but they are living through what will later be called the era of stagnation, the Brezhnev years, when the Soviet system maintained stability at the cost of dynamism, when economic growth slowed while official rhetoric remained triumphant, when the gap between public statements and private realities gradually widened. For now, though, they focus on immediate horizons, examinations to prepare for, university applications to complete, Komsomol responsibilities to fulfill. The system has shaped them, but they are beginning to shape their own responses to it, finding spaces for individual meaning within collective frameworks. They are both products of Soviet education and something more complex, young people with dreams and doubts, conformity and curiosity, moving toward an adulthood whose contours are still forming in the changing light of history. The record player spins quietly in the corner of a Moscow apartment. It's 1975 now, and the needle drops on a vinyl disc marked with Melodia, the state record label. The music that emerges is officially approved Soviet estrada, popular music with orchestral accompaniment and clear vocals, singing of love, nature, and occasionally patriotic themes. Natasha, now 25, sits in an armchair, listening. After graduating from the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute, she works as an engineer at a research facility in the capital. The small apartment is her own, allocated through her workplace after a 2-year wait, a relatively short time by Soviet standards. The furnishings are the standard Soviet issue that everybody recognizes. The same wall unit, the same sofa, the same lamps available in state stores across the country. But there are personal touches too. Books fill the shelves, classics of Russian literature, technical volumes related to her field, and a few treasured foreign works in translation that circulate among friends. A handmade macrame wall hanging created during a phase when this craft became inexplicably popular throughout the Soviet Union adds texture to the otherwise plain wall. On the small balcony, potted plants bring a touch of nature into the urban setting. The record finishes and Natasha carefully puts it away before selecting another, this one not from Melodia but a bootleg recording of Western music copied onto old X-ray films in a process known as music on ribs. The sound quality is poor, but the Beatles' songs are recognisable. This small act of cultural rebellion isn't particularly dangerous in the mid-1970s. The harshest repression of the Stalin era is long past, but it still exists in a grey area, neither fully approved nor actively prosecuted. This is the complex reality of Soviet leisure in the Brezhnev era, a mixture of state-provided entertainment, personal creativity within approved channels, and quiet exploration of alternatives that push against official boundaries without directly challenging them. The telephone rings, interrupting the music. It's Olga, Natasha's friend since school days, now a doctor at a Moscow clinic. "Are you still coming to the film tonight?" she asks. "They're showing The White Sun of the Desert at the Cosmos." Soviet cinema offers one of the more sophisticated forms of entertainment available to ordinary citizens. While heavily censored and required to operate within ideological constraints, talented directors and actors still manage to create works of genuine artistic merit. Some, like The White Sun of the Desert, become beloved classics, watched repeatedly by audiences who know the dialogue by heart. The film, an Eastern, the Soviet equivalent of a Western, set in Central Asia during the Civil War, blends adventure, comedy, and patriotic themes in a package that's both entertaining and ideologically acceptable. Released in 1970, it's already become a cultural touchstone, with cosmonauts traditionally watching it before space launches for good luck. "Of course," Natasha replies. "Shall we meet at the metro at 6? We can try the new cafe afterward if the line isn't too long." The emergence of cafes represents a small but significant expansion of leisure options in Soviet cities during this period. While not comparable to Western establishments in variety or atmosphere, they offer spaces for socializing outside the home or workplace, serving simple foods and non-alcoholic beverages in settings designed to be modestly attractive. The metro journey to the cinema passes through stations that remain one of the genuine marvels of Soviet public works. Palatial underground spaces decorated with mosaics, sculptures, and chandeliers kept meticulously clean. The contrast with the often shabby above-ground reality is striking but unremarked upon by riders who have grown accustomed to this daily juxtaposition. The Cosmos cinema, built in the distinctive Soviet modernist style of the 1960s, draws a substantial crowd despite this being a weekday evening. Soviet ticket prices are kept deliberately low. Culture is considered a public good that should be accessible to all, not a commercial product. Inside, before the film, newsreels play, a standard feature of Soviet cinema showings. These present carefully selected current events, emphasizing industrial achievements, fraternal relations with socialist countries, and the contrast between peaceful Soviet life and the supposed chaos and exploitation of the capitalist world. The audience watches with the polite attention given to official communications, neither fully believing nor openly questioning. The film itself draws more genuine engagement, laughter at the comedic moments, quiet appreciation of the beautiful desert landscapes, enjoyment of performances by actors who have become familiar presences in Soviet cultural life. The shared experience creates a temporary community among the audience, a collective participation in cultural life that remains one of the strengths of the Soviet system despite its many constraints. Afterward, Natasha and Olga walk to the cafe, continuing a conversation about the film that shifts easily between aesthetic appreciation and mild critique, the latter kept within safe boundaries by unspoken mutual agreement. Even in the relative relaxation of the Brezhnev era, certain topics remain sensitive, and Soviet citizens develop an intuitive sense of where the lines are drawn. The cafe is moderately crowded but not full. They find a table and order coffee and pastries. The quality is mediocre by international standards, but this isn't the point. The setting provides a space for conversation, for connection, for a small pleasure in the rhythm of work and domestic responsibilities. Their discussion moves from the film to mutual friends, workplace situations, and eventually to Olga's upcoming vacation on the Black Sea coast. This is another standard feature of Soviet life, the annual vacation at subsidized resorts, known as sanatoria, provided through workplaces or trade unions. These vacations combine rest, medical treatments, and structured activities in a package that reflects the Soviet approach to leisure as something that should be both enjoyable and improving. "I've been assigned to Sochi this year," Olga explains. 2 weeks in August, the clinic director said it was a reward for exceeding our preventative care targets. Such allocations, putevki or vacation vouchers, are distributed through workplaces based on a combination of merit, need, and sometimes connections. The better resorts are highly sought after, particularly those on the Black Sea coast with its relatively warm climate and beaches, a precious commodity in a country where much of the territory experiences harsh winters. "You're fortunate," Natasha replies. "I'm still waiting to hear about my application. Last year I ended up at a sanatorium outside Moscow because all the southern spots were taken." This is the reality of Soviet consumer experience, a system of allocation rather than purchasing power, where access to goods and services depends on position, connections, and sometimes simple luck. Money matters less than in capitalist economies, but other forms of capital, social connections, workplace status, party membership become crucial currencies. As they leave the cafe, the evening sky is still light. Summer in Moscow brings long days that stretch toward midnight. They walk for a while through the city centre, past the grand buildings that house government ministries and cultural institutions, through squares designed for public gatherings and demonstrations. "My brother got tickets for the Vysotsky concert next month," Olga mentions, lowering her voice slightly despite the relative openness of the topic. "He stood in line for 6 hours." Vladimir Vysotsky occupies a unique position in Soviet cultural life of the 1970s, immensely popular for his raspy-voiced performances of songs that push against official constraints without crossing into outright dissidence. His concerts are always sold out, his records nearly impossible to find through official channels but widely circulated through unofficial recordings. This parallel culture, neither fully approved nor completely forbidden, creates spaces where Soviet citizens can experience alternatives to official narratives without directly challenging the system. The authorities tolerate these grey areas as safety valves, recognizing that complete suppression might create more dangerous pressures. The weekend brings different leisure patterns. Saturday is still a workday in the Soviet Union of 1975, though there's discussion of eventually moving to a 5-day week. Sunday, however, offers free time for activities beyond the regular routine. For many Soviet families, Sunday centers on domestic tasks, shopping for the week ahead, cleaning, repairs, and food preparation. Consumer services are limited, and the DIY approach is a necessity rather than a lifestyle choice. Soviet apartments are constantly being maintained, improved, and adapted by their occupants, who develop impressive skills in working around shortages of materials and tools. But Sunday also offers opportunities for recreation. In summer, many urban dwellers head to nearby forests or riversides for picnics, swimming, and mushroom gathering, activities that cost nothing and provide connection with nature. Public parks offer cultural programs, concerts, and simple amusements. Sports facilities, basic but functional, provide opportunities for physical activity considered essential to well-rounded socialist development. Winter recreation adapts to the harsh climate. Ice skating in city parks, cross-country skiing in surrounding forests, or simply walking through snow-covered landscapes bundled against the cold. Indoor activities increase: chess tournaments, amateur theatrical performances, lectures at workers' clubs or cultural centres. This Sunday, Natasha visits her parents in their apartment across the city. The family gathering is a cornerstone of Soviet leisure, maintaining connections that provide both emotional support and practical assistance in navigating the system's challenges. Conversations around the kitchen table often last for hours, ranging from personal matters to carefully expressed political observations, all within the private sphere where greater honesty is possible. Her mother has prepared a special meal, using ingredients secured through various channels, some from regular shops, others from the farmers' market where collective farm workers can sell surplus produce at higher prices, and a few treasured items from the workplace distribution that supplements the regular retail system. "Look what your father's colleague brought back from East Germany," her mother says, proudly displaying a package of coffee, a luxury item in the Soviet context where instant coffee is the norm, and even that is often in short supply. The meal unfolds at a leisurely pace, accompanied by conversation that moves between family news, workplace stories, and discussion of a television program that everyone watched the previous evening. Soviet television offers limited channels and programming, but certain shows become national events, watched by huge portions of the population and providing shared cultural references. "Did you see 17 Moments of Spring?" her father asks, referring to a popular spy drama set during World War II. The whole design bureau stopped work to talk about the latest episode. These shared cultural experiences create connections across Soviet society, bridging differences in education, location, and occupation. Despite the system's many divisions and hierarchies, there remains a common cultural language that most citizens understand and participate in. After the meal, they listen to a radio program featuring classical music, another area where Soviet cultural provision excels. The state's emphasis on high culture means that classical music, ballet, and theatre receive substantial support, with performances accessible to ordinary citizens through subsidized tickets and regular broadcasts. Evening brings a return to Natasha's apartment and preparation for the work week ahead. The Soviet routine is predictable: 6 days of work followed by a single day of rest, with limited variation throughout the year except for official holidays. These holidays provide important punctuation in the Soviet calendar, combining ideological commemoration with genuine celebration. Revolution Day, November 7th, and May Day, May 1st, feature official parades followed by family gatherings. New Year's Eve, the major non-ideological celebration, includes decorated trees, secular versions of Christmas trees, special foods, and the exchange of gifts brought by Grandfather Frost rather than Santa Claus. Such celebrations blend state ceremony with personal warmth, official narratives with private meanings, another example of how Soviet citizens create spaces for authentic connection within ideological frameworks. The working week begins again on Monday, with its familiar rhythms of metro journeys, workplace interactions, and evening returns to private spaces. For Natasha, like many Soviet professionals, work provides not just income but identity and social connections. Her research facility, like most Soviet workplaces, functions as more than just a site of production or research. It's also a social institution that organizes various aspects of employees' lives, from housing allocation to vacation vouchers, from political education to cultural activities. The workplace trade union arranges theatre outings, sporting events, and holiday celebrations. This integration of work and social life reflects the Soviet attempt to create all-encompassing collectives that provide for citizens' needs while maintaining ideological alignment. The result is a system where private life never fully separates from public roles, where workplace relationships carry significant weight in overall social networks. One evening after work, Natasha attends a lecture at the House of Scientists, one of many specialized cultural centers that cater to particular professional groups. The topic is cybernetics, a field that has had a complex relationship with Soviet ideology but is now cautiously embraced as necessary for economic development. The audience consists mainly of specialists in related fields, creating an environment where technical discussions can occur with relatively limited ideological framing. Such professional gatherings offer spaces for more open exchange of ideas, though still within boundaries that participants understand intuitively. Afterward, a small group continues the discussion at a colleague's apartment, one of the informal gatherings where Soviet intellectual life often flourishes most authentically. In private spaces, with trusted associates, conversations can explore implications and questions that might be problematic in public settings. These kitchen table discussions, whether among family members, friends, or colleagues, represent a vital layer of Soviet social experience. Behind closed doors, people speak more freely, share unsanctioned materials, and develop perspectives that may diverge from official positions without constituting active opposition. For most Soviet citizens, this dual consciousness doesn't feel like hypocrisy, but like a practical adaptation to reality, accepting the system's constraints while creating spaces for authentic connection and meaning within them. Few actively oppose the regime. Most simply navigate its contours, finding niches where personal fulfillment remains possible. The week continues with its mixture of work obligations and modest leisure opportunities. One evening brings a visit to the Tretyakov Gallery, where Russian and Soviet art is displayed in a setting that emphasizes cultural continuity and national achievement. Another evening is spent at home, with a book borrowed from a friend, a translation of a foreign novel that isn't officially banned, but isn't widely available either. Weekend plans develop, perhaps a visit to the countryside if the weather holds, or a gathering at a friend's apartment to listen to music and talk. These small pleasures, these moments of connection and aesthetic enjoyment provide texture and meaning within the larger structures of Soviet life. This is leisure in the Soviet Union of the mid-1970s, limited by material constraints and ideological boundaries, yet still offering spaces for enjoyment, creativity, and human connection. The system shapes available options, but doesn't fully determine how individuals experience them or what meanings they create together. As Natasha prepares for sleep, her mind reviews the week ahead, work responsibilities, an upcoming visit from an old university friend, plans to search for winter boots that are rumoured to be available at a particular store. The mixture of routine certainties and small uncertainties that constitutes daily life in a system that promises complete security, yet delivers unpredictable shortages and constraints. The room darkens as she turns off the lamp, Outside, Moscow continues its nighttime existence, quieter than during the day but never completely still. The vast apparatus of the Soviet state surrounds her, with its power to allocate resources, define acceptable expression, and shape life trajectories. Yet within this system, individuals continue to create connections, find meanings, and build lives that are never fully captured by official categories or narratives. Sleep approaches gradually, bringing temporary release from the negotiations and adaptations that Soviet life requires. Tomorrow will bring another day of navigating between public performance and private authenticity, between collective imperatives and personal aspirations. But for now, there is just the darkness, the quiet, and the drift toward dreams that remain beyond the state's ability to plan or direct. Evening shadows lengthen across Moscow as the sun sets behind the city's distinctive skyline. It's 1983 now, and subtle changes are rippling through Soviet society. The long tenure of Leonid Brezhnev ended with his death the previous year, and after the brief leadership of Yuri Andropov, the system seems to be drifting, uncertain of its future direction. In her Moscow apartment, Natasha, now 33, prepares dinner in her small kitchen. The apartment feels more settled now, accumulated possessions, giving it the lived-in quality that comes with years of habitation. Photographs on the walls document personal history. Family gatherings, vacations at Black Sea resorts, celebrations with friends. Books have multiplied on the shelves, representing years of careful collection through official bookstores, second-hand shops, and exchanges with friends. The kitchen, though compact by Western standards, is the heart of the home, as it is in most Soviet apartments. Here, over countless cups of tea, conversations unfold that would never occur in public spaces. The kitchen table has witnessed discussions of literature, quiet political observations, personal confessions, and the sharing of life's ordinary triumphs and disappointments. Tonight, Natasha is expecting guests, a small gathering of close friends who meet regularly in each other's homes. Such gatherings represent one of the most valued forms of Soviet leisure, especially as the initial energy of the Brezhnev years has faded into what many now call stagnation. A period of material stability but diminishing dynamism and growing cynicism about official pronouncements. She checks the contents of her refrigerator, a standard Soviet model that hums somewhat loudly in the corner. The food she's prepared is simple but represents significant effort in a system where shopping requires visiting multiple stores, standing in various lines, and often adapting plans based on what happens to be available rather than what was desired. There's a salad of grated carrots and cabbage, boiled potatoes, pickles made by her mother from summer vegetables, black bread purchased fresh that morning, and a small amount of sausage secured through a workplace distribution. For dessert, there's a cake made from a recipe shared by a colleague, improvised to work around chronic shortages of certain ingredients. The doorbell rings and Natasha welcomes her first guests, Olga and her husband Mikhail carrying a bottle of Soviet champagne, Sovetskoye Shampanskoye, the sweet, inexpensive, sparkling wine that accompanies most Soviet celebrations. They're followed shortly by Viktor, a colleague from the Research Institute, and Irina, a university friend who now teaches literature at a secondary school. The ritual of gathering is familiar and comforting. Coats are hung in the small entryway, house slippers are offered, removing outdoor shoes is universal in Soviet homes, and everyone moves to the kitchen where most of the evening will unfold, despite the presence of a proper living room. Soviet kitchens, however small, are social spaces by long tradition. The conversation begins with exchanges of news: whose child is doing well at school, who has received a promotion, what new items have appeared in local shops. This gradually transitions to discussions of books recently read, films seen, music heard on the radio, or through unofficial recordings. Soviet cultural life remains rich despite limitations, with intense appreciation for works that manage to convey meaningful human experiences within ideological constraints. "Have you read Trifonov's latest?" asks Irina, referring to a Soviet author whose nuanced portrayals of urban life push against simplistic socialist realism without crossing into open dissidence. "Not yet," Natasha replies. "Is it available at the Lenin Library?" "There's a waiting list," Irina says, "but I can lend you my copy when I finish it." Such sharing of books, both officially published works that are simply hard to find due to limited print runs and unofficially circulated materials from abroad or by unpublished Soviet authors, creates networks of readership that supplement the official distribution system. As the evening progresses, the conversation deepens, touching on subjects that would be approached more cautiously in public settings. Not outright political opposition, few ordinary Soviet citizens engage in that, but more honest assessments of daily realities. Quiet acknowledgement of the gap between official promises and lived experiences. "My department hasn't received new equipment in 3 years, Victor notes. We're supposed to be developing cutting-edge technology with machines from the 60s. Others nod in recognition. The Soviet economy's growing difficulties are evident in workplaces across the country, though official media continues to report fulfilled plans and advancing socialism. This disconnect between rhetoric and reality has become a defining feature of late Soviet life, creating a society where most people participate in official rituals while maintaining private reservations. The television plays softly in the background. The evening news program Vremya, with its predictable format of leadership activities, industrial achievements, and critical reports on Western societies. Nobody pays much attention. Television in Soviet homes often serves as background rather than focus, except for particularly popular programs or films. After dinner, they move to the living room where Natasha's prized possession, a cassette player acquired through considerable effort and expense, allows them to listen to music that ranges from official Soviet recordings to unofficially duplicated Western albums. The sound quality is mediocre, but the content provides connection to a broader world of musical expression than state radio typically offers. The evening unfolds at a gentle pace, without the need to check watches or rush home. Public transportation runs until midnight in Moscow, and these gatherings of friends represent too important a source of connection and authentic exchange to be curtailed by concerns about the hour. Conversation turns to children. Olga and Mikhail have 2, now in primary school, and the complexities of raising them within the Soviet system. Parents navigate between wanting their children to fit in, to have the opportunities that come with successful participation in official structures like the Pioneers and Komsomol, and wanting to instill values that may sometimes conflict with official messaging. Sasha came home reciting that America wants war and the Soviet Union wants peace, Olga says of her 8-year-old son. "I tried to explain that ordinary people everywhere mostly want the same things. This delicate balancing act, teaching children to navigate the system without being fully defined by it, occupies many Soviet parents of this generation, themselves raised with less ambivalence about official narratives but now more aware of their limitations." As the evening continues, the conversation shifts to practical matters, strategies for securing scarce goods, information about which shops have received shipments of needed items, advice on navigating bureaucratic processes for anything from internal travel permits to apartment repairs. Such practical knowledge, shared through personal networks, is essential to successful navigation of the Soviet system. Official channels provide limited and often unreliable information, while personal connections offer both practical assistance and emotional support in dealing with the system's frustrations. Around 11, the gathering begins to disperse. The friends take their leave with warm embraces and plans for the next meeting, perhaps at Olga and Mikhail's apartment next month. The connection these evenings provide, the opportunity to speak more freely, to share authentic reactions to life's experiences, makes them precious in a society where public and private expressions often diverge significantly. After her guests depart, Natasha begins the small rituals of preparing for sleep. She washes the dishes, no dishwashers in Soviet apartments, and tidies the kitchen. The radio plays classical music from the single state channel still broadcasting at this hour. She waters the plants on her windowsill, living things that bring nature into the urban apartment and require daily attention that grounds her in simple, tangible care. The bathroom routine is basic by Western standards of the 1980s. Soviet apartments have hot water and indoor plumbing, but products are limited. A standard soap, basic toothpaste, simple shampoo. The consumer variety that characterizes Western personal care is absent here, where functionality matters more than choice or luxury. In her bedroom, Natasha sets the alarm clock for the morning and turns back the covers of her bed. The bedding is sturdy and practical, like most Soviet consumer goods, designed for durability rather than style, expected to last for years rather than being regularly replaced. Before sleep, she reads for a while, a collection of poems by Anna Akhmatova, whose work, once suppressed, is now cautiously published in the somewhat more relaxed cultural climate of the post-Stalin decades. The poems speak of suffering, resilience, and the preservation of human dignity under difficult circumstances, themes that resonate across Soviet experience even when not explicitly political. Outside the window, Moscow settles into night. The huge city, capital of the world's largest country, never fully sleeps, but its rhythms slow. Factories operate around the clock, but shops are closed. Theatres and concert halls dark. Offices empty until morning. The metro runs less frequently, though it never completely stops. The vast apparatus of the state continues functioning, power plants generating electricity, security services monitoring, the basic infrastructure of urban life maintained. Natasha's thoughts drift as sleep approaches. Her life has unfolded within the structures of the Soviet system, education directed toward economic needs, housing allocated through official channels, leisure shaped by state provision and limitations. Yet within these structures, she has created a meaningful existence, professional accomplishment, deep friendships, appreciation of culture, small daily pleasures that accumulate into a life uniquely her own. Like most Soviet citizens, she has developed a dual consciousness, participating in official rituals and narratives while maintaining private understandings that sometimes complement and sometimes contradict them. This isn't experienced as painful hypocrisy, but as a practical adaptation to reality, a way of preserving authentic selfhood within systemic constraints. As sleep draws nearer, her thoughts become more fragmentary, moving between memories, current concerns, and vague plans for the days ahead. The rhythm of Soviet life is predictable in its broad outlines: work, household tasks, social gatherings, official holidays marking the calendar year. Within this predictability, small variations and personal meanings create texture and significance. What she doesn't know, cannot know, as she drifts towards sleep in 1983, is that the system surrounding her, which appears solid and permanent despite its inefficiencies and constraints, has less than a decade remaining. The Soviet Union, which has shaped every aspect of her life, from education to housing to the food on her table, will dissolve before the 1980s end. The signs of strain are visible: economic stagnation, technological lag behind the West, growing cynicism about official pronouncements, but few imagine complete transformation rather than gradual reform. The vocabulary for what might replace the Soviet system doesn't yet exist in common discussion. The possibilities remain unarticulated except in dissident circles far from mainstream experience. For now, there is just this apartment, this evening, this gradual transition from wakefulness to sleep. Outside, the huge country continues its existence, spanning 11 time zones, encompassing hundreds of ethnic groups, structured by a political system that has endured for nearly 7 decades. Inside, a single citizen concludes her day, one life among millions, shaped by this vast experiment in creating an alternative to capitalism with all its achievements and failures. A few years later, in 1985, a new leader named Mikhail Gorbachev will ascend to power, introducing concepts like glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, that will unleash forces beyond his ability to control. The rigid structures of Soviet life will begin to loosen, creating both new possibilities and new uncertainties. For ordinary citizens like Natasha, these changes will bring complex mixtures of opportunity and challenge. Greater freedom of expression and access to previously restricted information will expand horizons. Economic reforms will create possibilities for initiative and entrepreneurship alongside inflation and instability. The solid guarantees of the Soviet system, guaranteed employment, stable prices, predictable if limited consumer access, will give way to the volatile dynamics of markets still taking shape. Some will adapt quickly to these new conditions, finding niches in the emerging system. Others will struggle with the dissolution of structures that, despite their limitations, provided security and predictability. Most will experience some combination of liberation and loss as the world they've known throughout their lives transforms around them. But all of that lies in an unimaginable future as Natasha drifts towards sleep on this Moscow night in 1983. Her thoughts slow, her breathing deepens, and the day's experiences gradually dissolve into the approaching landscape of dreams. The small sounds of the apartment, the refrigerator's hum, the occasional creak of the building settling, the distant murmur of a neighbour's radio create a familiar acoustic backdrop to the transition from wakefulness to sleep. These ordinary sounds, these modest comforts of home, exist within a system that encompasses everything from nuclear arsenals to space exploration, from industrial production to ideological pronouncements. This is the paradox of individual existence within vast political structures, that personal experience remains intimate and specific even while shaped by forces operating at national and global scales. Natasha's sleep, like her waking life, unfolds within contexts. She didn't choose but has learned to navigate, finding spaces for authentic being within circumstances partly given and partly created. Outside her window, stars are visible through breaks in the cloud cover, the same stars seen from Washington or London or Beijing, indifferent to the ideological divisions of Earth. Inside, a citizen of the Soviet Union completes her day like millions of others across the country, each with unique dreams and concerns, each with personal joys and sorrows that transcend political categories, even while influenced by them. As consciousness fades, the boundaries between historical context and individual experience blur. There is just this moment, this gradual release of waking awareness, this drift toward the renewal that sleep provides. The complexities of Soviet life, its achievements and failures, its security and constraints, its collective narratives and private truths recede temporarily as sleep approaches. In this transition between wakefulness and dreams, between public participation and private renewal, Natasha's experience touches something universal. Beyond systems and ideologies, beyond the specific structures of Soviet life or its alternatives, there remains the basic human cycle of activity and rest, engagement and withdrawal, the social world and the intimate space of sleep. And as her breathing deepens and her thoughts scatter like leaves in a gentle wind, she crosses the border between historical specificity and the shared human experience of surrender to sleep. The Soviet citizen becomes simply a sleeping person, joined in this most basic of experiences with humans everywhere, regardless of the systems they inhabit or the ideologies they embrace or reject. The night deepens, Moscow sleeps, not everyone at once, but in overlapping cycles of rest and wakefulness that maintain the city's essential functions while allowing its citizens necessary renewal. Tomorrow will bring another day of navigation through the structures and possibilities of late Soviet life. But for now, there is just the darkness, the quiet, and the universal human journey into sleep. And with that, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.